Welcome to CSIS Online. The way we bring you events is changing, but we'll still present live analysis and award-winning digital media from our Dracopolis Ideas Lab. All on your time, live or on demand. This is CSIS Online. Welcome to CSIS Online. The way we bring you events is changing, but we'll still present live analysis and award-winning digital media from our Dracopolis Ideas Lab. All on your time, live or on demand. This is CSIS Online.
Welcome to CSIS for this virtual event on the future of AI and the Department of Defense. I'm Lindsay Shepard with the International Security Program. I'm joined today by my co-host Brian Katz with the International Security Program and the Transnational Threats Project, and our guest, Lieutenant General Michael S. Groen. General Groen assumed his current position as the director of the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center on October 1st of 2020. As a member of the JAIC team, he is leading the transformation of the U.S. joint warfighting and departmental processes through the integration of artificial intelligence. General Groen has an illustrious career before this. Prior to his nomination, he was assigned to the National Security Agency, the Joint Staff J2, which is the intelligence directorate for all of the non-DoD speak folks, and Marine Corps Intelligence. He has served in a variety of operational ground, air, and naval units, and his service has taken him to Central America, the Western Pacific, the Philippines, the Balkans, and Iraq. So we are just delighted to have you, General, join us today at CSIS to talk about all things artificial intelligence.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lindsay, and Brian for co-hosting as well. It's really great. I appreciate CSIS doing these forums. I watch them a lot, and I appreciate being part of it. So, and thanks to everybody who's taken the time to listen in as well.
All right, sir. Well, as we just learned, you're sort of fresh in the seat over at the JAIC now. I think everyone would be really interested in just broadly what you think your top priorities are coming in as director when you look out maybe over the next 1 to 2 years, and maybe reflecting back coming in after General Shanahan's tenure. What are the core areas of success from your perspective to build upon, and what are some of the new mission areas that you're thinking about for the JAIC when we look forward the next couple of years?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Brian. Sure. So if you don't mind, let me start in 1914. Yes, 1914. I see the look on your face. We, like many of us, I'm binge watching Netflix, this spring, and I'm watching World War I documentaries, right? Colorized World War I documentaries. And so you watch these World War I documentaries, and you see, like in the early months and year or so of the war, you see these guys riding into battle on horseback with long sticks with iron spikes on the end, lancers, right? And so, and you think, how in the world could this be, right? So these guys were citizens of the industrial age, right? They knew all the artifacts of the industrial age. They were familiar with this, right? I mean, they've seen an internal combustion engine. They've probably ridden in a train. They've heard of airplanes and talked on a telephone or whatever. All of the artifacts were there. Yet here these guys are, these lancers and cavalry units charging right into the face of machine guns, right? So, the artifacts of the age were plentiful, but the implications of industrial warfare were just not clear, right? And when I look at that, I see like a transformation to industrial age warfare that was entirely foreseeable, but not foreseen, right? The artifacts were there. They were familiar with the artifacts. They used them, but they did not see the impact on industrial age warfare and the horror that became, right? So this transformation or this transition that we are in near, who knows exactly where we are in the point of this technological curve, but entering an information warfare environment, right? It's an information age. We are surrounded by the artifacts of the information age. We're familiar with them. We use them every day. We're using them right now. But I don't know that we've really thought through the implications of the information age on warfare and what that actually means. A lot of people are thinking about it. A lot of people are talking about it. But, every day we see these artifacts, and every day, because it's foreseen, because we've thought about this, the mandate for actually dealing with this, right? So we don't want to, these can't be foreseen but not acted on. We can foresee them. So it's up to us to act now so that we don't miss this transformation, so that we don't put U.S. forces in a really bad way. We don't have Lancers riding into machine guns or the information age equivalent of that. That honestly is my number one priority. So with that as a backdrop, that is always in my mind. Now we look at, okay, well, how do we through that lens, how do we transform the department, right? It's clear, I think, and probably most of the listeners here have dealt with this. Our enemies have not only learned this technology, learned how to operate in the information age, but they've embraced it, right? They've bought in full measure to compete with us on the battlefield if necessary. And so, even if you look at doctrine out there, you've gone from informationized warfare to intelligentized warfare, right? Which is a subtle nuance, but it's a significant one about the maturity of the information age and kind of how we're going to have to react to it. So, just from a purely technical environment, I think the AI industry is like a $79 billion global enterprise or something to that effect. So, like I said, the artifacts of the information age are just like right in front of us, and now it's time for us to drop our lances, right, and get back to our keyboards and actually start making things happen. So, in the JAIC context, in the early days of the JAIC, we really kind of got our footing in early 2019, so a year and a half ago or so. The early days of the JAIC were all about building AIs, right? Solving, mostly small problems or, small AIs, connecting data sources to problems, to algorithms, and making it happen. And so in what we call JAIC 1.0, we were really about products, right? And it was seeding the environment to kind of show what was possible. But if you look at what our mission is, and we had like 30 plus different projects, and they're all great, right? I don't denigrate them at all, but it's making products is not sufficient to transform the department, right? And so we look at our mission. Our mission is to accelerate DoD adoption of AI technology. Our vision is to transform the department through the integration of artificial intelligence. And I think for us, as we roll into what we call JAIC 2.0, the issue of transformation becomes really, really important, right? So we're looking at, what is the balance or the ratio between product development, product building, and enablement, right? Broad enablement across the department. And so in JAIC 2.0, as we term it right now, we're looking to lean a little bit further in the broad enablement place, right? Because we think that our transformational value will be much better in the enablement space. And so we'll obviously continue to do products. We're going to continue to work on some of the high-end, game-changing technological programs. But we really want to start to create a tide that rises all boats across the department. So one of the things that we're going to do that is to build better relationships, right? So what we want to do is seek out problems. If in JAIC 1.0 we built technologies and then tried to find a market for them, in JAIC 2.0 we're going to be problem pull, right? We're going to build the relationships across the department to help us understand where the most compelling problems are, so that then we can pull our technology development and our enablement in that direction. Through it all, we want to be focused on transformation, and then we also want to be agile as an organization. So if the instantiation of AI across the department is very uneven, some places are very robust, some places haven't even thought it through yet. So we will continue to adapt our organization to meet that demand signal wherever that is. And as the department matures in its AI integration, we'll continue to move up the value chain, and we'll talk about some things, beyond sort of the current state of the department. So thanks for that's a long answer, but I kind of wanted to just frame it for for the rest of the conversation, how we're looking at this battle space.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you. And I think, before we pivot to, digging into the meat of, what's going on at the JAIC, I think you really teed up some good through lines for us in, what the JAIC is doing, thinking about this transformational change and, building relationships with the customers, which essentially is the rest of the DoD and the military branches for you. But I'm struck, thinking through your career and your experience being very heavily in intelligence in technical agencies and departments like the NSA. I imagine, have you lived some of these transformational challenges and barriers in your previous career that are informing your work at the JAIC, and how you're pulling forward those lessons learned and experiences from kind of, living at the ground floor of this debate? I'd love to hear, a little bit about how you're approaching that from your Marine Corps and your intelligence experience.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thanks, Lindsay. I guess first of all, I think, unprecedented in the JAIC on 10 November, we're going to have a Marine Corps birthday party, right? So, let's just have that, put that on the record. I think all of the services are thinking very closely about, reimagining warfare. I don't think that we have an unawareness problem, right? I think it's pretty broad. I've spent, I grew up as an intel guy, but honestly, I've been an operational planner. I've been a commander in an infantry division. I've been, so with a broad base of experience, I think, from members from any service, especially folks, maybe of my vintage, we participated in maneuver campaigns, right? We participated in counterinsurgency campaigns. And in those campaigns, we had to integrate intelligence, fires, maneuver, logistics. And when we did that, just, a decade ago, 2 decades ago, these processes were manual. They were stovepiped. They were very slow. They were laden with friction, right? We would take just segmented chunks of data. We do assessments on them. We couldn't really confirm them, but we would try to figure out what's true. We'd put them on PowerPoint slides, right? And then we tee them up for decisions for commanders and these decisions were obsolete. By the time they were even teed up for decision making, they were obsolete. And so, we did things like, the air tasking order, right? The ATO, the famous ATO. We used to print that off and fly it out to the ship, right? So that the ship could execute the ATO, an inflexible process that, no offense to anybody who's writing ATOs, but, that is like prototypical of the kind of process that characterized us just a decade or 2 decades ago, right? And so, we sent small units into very dangerous places without access to current intel, without a responsive plan for fire support, without regard to their readiness status. And as a consequence, we experienced and understood the friction, right, of modern warfare, making decisions with very little knowledge of the enemy, very little knowledge about our own force posture, very little knowledge about the decision environment. And I guess I would characterize it as best guess decision making. My old boss, General Dunford, he used to talk about this friction, and he talked about order, counter order, and disorder, right? Where you make an order based on what you think is happening. When you realize that was wrong, and you come up with some other plan, you create you issue a counter order, and by the time you've done that a couple of times, you've got disorder across the force, right? And then you've got at the bottom end, Marines, soldiers running around, why in the hell did they make that decision, right? That doesn't make any sense. This, welcome to industrial age warfare, practice in the information age, right? The information age changes the conditions for everything, right? Command and control, especially, because that's at the heart of AI integration. But we're on the cusp of data-driven warfare, information age warfare. It's gonna require these complex enterprises that can be accessed very simply, right? So to the users, they need to be very, very simple, even if they, that hides their complexity. Fact-driven decisions, rapid cycle times, integrated effects, all of these things, integrating all of the warfighting functions right across an operation. Always on enterprises, you don't shut it down, and when something happens, then you start paying attention. You pay attention all the time. If you're not, your machines are paying attention all the time. Leadership decision making at all levels. So I'm sure that the folks listening have thought through like AI applications down to the squad level. artificial or augmented reality headsets, at a squad leader level, being able to, see, in support of small unit action. It's not panacea. Friction will always be with us, but reducing that friction to a place that we can create tempo measured against the enemy's speed of action is really what we're after here in AI. All of those things, folks like me, have experienced those things and kind of can see now what wrong looks like. So now we can start building what right looks like, right?
Yes, sir. Listening to your reflections there, I think the main takeaway is that it sounds like across the military enterprise, it's intelligence officers who are the best, and that it's intelligence officers who we should be looking at promoting into leadership. So, not that I'm biased in any way, but
yeah.
So I think we'll want to circle back more on what you ended with there, which is really looking at how AI can be better integrated and enabling warfighting functions. But maybe before that, taking a step back to something you said earlier, just about the JAIC's role in facilitating AI adoption.
Yeah.
Another way to put it is, how can the JAIC help AI scale across the department? And in order to do that, you need the infrastructure, data governance, and the broad enterprise management practices in place in order to do that. So I'd love to hear your reflections on that, sort of looking at the JAIC's role in helping AI scale and where you think the infrastructure is now to do that, and what maybe your priorities are in building that up in the next couple of years.
Yeah, sure, Brian. It's a great question. I mean, scale is a magic word here. So I guess maybe I'd start that answer with kind of a observation of our process. This is not brilliance. Everybody has seen this, right? And it drives everybody crazy. Like we in this building, in this department, we have natural stovepipes, right? We stovepipe by service. We stovepipe by function. We stovepipe by geographical region. It's nobody's fault. It's tribal, right? I mean, it's in our DNA, right? This is kind of how humans think. And so it's a natural consequence of that. The problem with that is stovepipes don't scale, right? And so if scale is what you need to transform a department, you can't do it from stovepipes. So in this space, I think here's where we have to learn from commercial industry. When Lance Corporal Ura, grouses that, she's got more capability on her iPhone than the C2 system that she's operating. Okay, we actually probably ought to pay attention to that, right? We really need to listen to that, right? Because there's great wisdom here. Why doesn't a ship captain have a digital assistant that talks to the vessel, right? Or why doesn't the helmsman have that? Or the bosun, on the deck? How about the shipyard, right? Predictive maintenance for, and maintenance scheduling and these sorts of things. Like the answer really lies here in beyond stovepipes. Let's talk about an enterprise, right? So if you think about the enterprise in which all of these things need to be integrated, it really helps, you think. In the CIO here in the department, there's a program of digital modernization, right? So that includes, JADC2. It includes, modernized software, processes, cloud computing, improved data. That's kind of how we have to be thinking about this. So in our warfighting, we should be thinking about platforms, right? We should be thinking about APIs and apps, right? Sources of data that, our young service people can write apps and pull together the information they need from reliable data sources and actually create apps that allow them to fight in an app-friendly environment, but in a way that they can actually be data informed no matter where they are, on the battlefield. So, the components of this digital modernization that the CIO here is executing, they all feed this, right? And if you think through the commercial use cases, like, how does a net-based, ride-sharing service scale? Well, it does it through a service architecture, right? So it has data on customers, it has data on cars, it links the two together. How hard is that to scale that to another city? It's trivial, right? It's almost automatic. As we think through warfighting in the data age, we think through about how we transform at scale. we have to learn from the way the commercial environment does this. How does a net-based how does a search platform handle ISR tasking, right? How does how would an online storefront handle the allocation of platforms to deliver rapid fires across the battlefield? It comes down to platforms. You can't do online shopping if you don't have a digital storefront, if you don't have access to product, if you don't have delivery mechanisms. And so we need to think through like those services and that architecture. What is the fires use case? If you're trying to integrate ground fires, rockets, aviation, like how do you do that, right? How would Uber do that, right? That's the kind of question we need to be asking ourselves as we design the force. Integrated at scale and speed is absolutely what we're talking about here for effective information age warfare. So now you use the word the JAIC in the question, so I have to answer it with the JAIC because here's the JAIC. The JAIC is in the center of this. We're part of the team, right? And transformation of the department is way beyond the 150 or so people we have in the JAIC. So we're a leveraged investment, right? We are the small investment that the department will leverage. We're going to create the forums to bring sort of all of these into these stovepipes, into an organ, or these cylinders of excellence into an engine, that actually can generate power. JAIC, helps more nodes get on the network. It manages the infrastructure, the policies, kind of those common threads, those cross-cutting themes that enable AI across the department. We have an executive steering group that has all of the services and more, the agencies, the command commands that helps us make decision making as an enterprise rather than as stovepipes. So JAIC has an organizational enabling role there that facilitates the entire department action.
No, thank you. You teed up our segue wonderfully because one of the aspects of that enabling foundation and enabling organization is the JAIC's focus on its joint common foundation. So I know our audience would, one, for the maybe non-AI folks, if you can give a quick couple sentences on, what that is for the folks that are new to the DoD AI conversation. And then for those of us that have been here a while, I know we are all looking forward to hearing an update on progress and where the JCF is to date.
Yeah, great. Yep. Thanks, Lindsay. JCF in a JAIC 2.0 construct where we're really seeking now to help enable a transformation across the department, you can see like how important a common foundation actually is. And it was important before. In JAIC 2.0, we're putting the pedal on the gas, on the gas pedal a little bit closer to the floor here, because we really want to put a focus now on enabling. And one of the primary ways to enable is to give them a platform. Now, I am not talking here, the Joint Common Foundation, the joint platform is not, one platform to rule them all. That's not what we're talking about here, right? There are very mature and robust platforms that already exist across the services and some of the other areas. And so we're not really talking about, making any changes to that kind of environment. What we're talking about is enabling sort of all the disadvantaged users across the department. Those warfighting functions, those enterprises that see artificial intelligence use cases in their workflow, in their process, in their mission, but they really don't know what to do, right? And so there's two aspects to our platform that we hope are going to be helpful in this regard. The first piece of that is the technical platform, right? So yes, we are building a technical platform. This is all commercial cloud. We're not building a data center or anything like that. We're just talking about building a platform upon which now disadvantaged users, especially, but everybody in time will be able to take advantage of data services. For example, they might be able to store their training data. We might be able to offer data services on this platform for data labeling or data conditioning or whatever. We may be able to help them build algorithms on the platform. As the JCF platform grows, we may be able to do things like store and catalog algorithms, right? Because, one thing about this business we certainly discovered here in the JAIC is problem sets seem to cluster, right? And so in those clusters, sometimes a single model can actually be repurposed multiple times, like really quickly, right? So you just need to plug in new data sources and you're off to the races. And so, if we can provide that service again over time as these algorithms are developed, then that becomes a way that we can enable somebody really quickly. So there's the technical aspect of it. There's also, I guess, what I would call the soft services. There's probably a better way to articulate that. But what we're thinking about there is the things like test and evaluation best practices, right? Test and evaluation or validation verification best practices, right? Because TEV&V is absolutely critical to everybody's AI, right? And so that's something that's a cross-cutting function that we can now provide a resource for everybody to take advantage of. Best practices, contracting assistance, right? So if you are a new player in the AI space, you have a use case, and you just want some advice about how do I actually contract for this? Like, what's the best way to do that? We'll be able to help with that, right? In some cases, we'll even have contract vehicles that other users can take advantage of, and so they can really get things on contract and get things moving quickly. Training, education, so if we're we have an education strategy that's that crosses all the members of the ESG. And one of the things we're looking at is certification, right? How do you offer training quickly? We could offer training on the edge on the JCF platform. We could create education opportunities there, and then we could track like certifications and course accomplishments, so you kind of get a sense for somebody's skills. If we did that in a common way on a common foundation, now you'd be able to track. Hey, I have an Air Force member coming into my command. Let's just check what her skills are, right? Let's check what his, what courses he's accomplished, so that we can, make sure that we align the talent to the job. So that's the kind of stuff that I think will get on the platform. It will be transformative in its own right. We're eager to make progress, so we're cranking it out. We're going to use an MVP approach, of course. So I think we'll start offering services, probably in 2021 here, and then scale the number and type of services available, right? So it'll start simple, and then we'll grow it in complexity and scale as we need to. As we look, the one other thing I'd say about the JCF kind of gives us a footing for how we connect customers to the technology. So, we have kind of recrafted our missions unit to really be focused on relationships. And I talked before about finding those compelling problems and being problem pull. We're going to use our missions team then to help AI users or potential AI users do their own like AI readiness assessments, and then bring them into the platform with a sense for, okay, what do we need to do to help them? What level do we need to help them get to? And so some customers will come in very mature, and all they need is a link to education and a contract vehicle. Some customers will be starting from zero, and we'll have to kind of work them in. So that's how we're thinking about the platform. So it really is a basis for enabling a broad number of users.
Yes, sir. Thanks for laying out the objectives and way forward with JCF, and just that general, more enterprise-wide view of where the JAIC is headed from an infrastructure perspective. But maybe now let's go back to where we were going earlier in the conversation, which is zooming in down at the mission level, and particularly focusing on the warfighter. And you'd mentioned, right, the JAIC, its sort of original 6 core mission areas. The accomplishments we've seen there in things like logistics and predictive maintenance, day-to-day business functions, record management, training and education products, as you mentioned. But, that's sort of the title of our session today, and, really integrating in your perspective from the Marine Corps and your experiences across operational intelligence planning roles is help our audience think through the way you think through how AI can really enable the warfighter down sort of the operational level. And when you're thinking of core military domains and capabilities, ground, air, sea, cyber, Maybe just sort of, maybe your broad view, and then some specific examples when you look at warfighting functions where you see some near-term potential, not just, that sort of 5 to 10 year down the line where I think a lot of people kind of get it, but like really in the near term where you see some real potential.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Brian. So this is probably the most important question we can ask, right? And one thing that I think is a huge inhibitor to us as all of us together. Military acronyms can sometimes, we're famous for military acronyms right here in this building. They can be grotesque, right? So the most grotesque acronym that I've encountered is C5ISRT, right? So C5ISRT, if that was a thing, right? It's not a thing. It's 9 things, right? So it just sort of what that tells me that is that C5ISRT is a code word for, well, that's all that data stuff that I don't want to be bothered with because my IT guy will come and he'll give me a box or he'll fix my my access or whatever. So we shorthand information in an information age as, yeah, that's that stuff that we don't care about. This is a very strange way to treat like the fuel that powers the information age, right? And so I think it's just death to an information warfare or information age force to not treat data as a weapon, right? And or at least as the fuel for the weapons. And so AI is certainly not a panacea. It's not a magic box. You read a lot of hype and you just kind of shake your head. It's a tool. It's a tool for decision-making at every level. It's a tool for reducing friction. It's a tool for creating tempo. It's a tool for handling an enemy's tempo that may be faster than your own. How many hypersonic missiles are inbound? How are you going to deal with that as a human? That's how we need to be thinking about AI, right? Like this is warfighting stuff. Unequivocally, this is the business of commanders, right? Because AI implementation, if there's any commanders listening, AI implementation is about your decision-making process, right? This isn't some black box that a contractor built in a lab somewhere and they put on your desk. This is modeling your decision process, right? So, how do you make decisions, right? What data do you use to drive those decisions? How do you integrate that data into the decisions? We have a long and I guess successful history of making decisions by the seat of our pants. It's time for us to now think about how do we make decisions based on data about reality, measured reality, so that we can then make better decisions and make them really, really fast, right? We'll always have humans in the loop somewhere. And I just think, from my limited experience here at the JAIC, I mean, what I've observed is AI and human interactions and AI and human teaming is a real thing, and it really is a powerful thing, right? So if you can tee up the right decisions for the right commander, and you can do it quickly and make it really easy for commanders to make decisions, okay, now you've enabled warfighting, right? And so this is how you this is how you start to integrate intel and fires. This is how you start to integrate intel and maneuver based on like facts about your units that you're maneuvering, right? Hey, I'd like to move that destroyer up. Oh, but it's down one screw. And so it's moving too slow. That kind of data, available for a commander. Hey, the weather, I've got the weather always, at my fingertips. I know the status of my unit and I know what red is doing too. Okay, that's a whole nother paradigm for decision-making, right? And it is all the way down to the tactical level. We've got some AI work now, that identifies objects like from a security perspective, right? Shouldn't a squad leader who's leading a patrol into a village have some ability to have an augmented reality view of the environment around him or her? Shouldn't the selection of supporting fires options be something that's almost push button? Maybe it's even easier than that. I mean, one of the worst problems, that you deal with as a force is, now you have a small unit that moves into contact And now the first thing you have to do is go to ground and wait for some command level to kind of work through all the statistics to figure out how to support them by fire. What if we could just make that, that process really easy, right? That's the kind of stuff that we have to think of. And I think we as the leaders that are on this call, I mean, we have the opportunity now to again, minimum viable product. Let's start getting AI into the hands of our soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, spacemen, or whatever you call a space person. We have to get that into the hands of those oftentimes young men and women that can really start to help us shape, impacting, at the micro level all the way to the macro level, our warfighting and how we bring warfighting functions together. It's really exciting to me. I mean, you can, I think about, command and control a lot, but think about 6th generation warfare, right? Where now platforms are integrated into enterprises and architectures. Think about, fleets of unmanned surface vessels, on the broad ocean. Think about unmanned subsurface vessels or aircraft with swarming drones, loyal wingman kind of concepts. Like these concepts are out there, and they're really good. They're all AI powered, right? And so every warfighter has to think about that in their own context. And the last thing I'll say about this, unless you want to hear more, here's the thing. In the information age military, if you are the unit that hasn't integrated data into your decision making, you are now the weakest link in the joint force, right? And you are the weakest link that's going to be exploited by an enemy who is collecting data on you. Nobody wants to be the weakest link that, nobody wants to be the nail that led to the shoe, that led to the loss of the horse, that led to the loss of the rider, that led to the loss of the battle, right? That's what we're threatened with if we don't adopt this, broadly across the military.
So, I mean, you raise I think the focus on integration and implementation, brings to the forefront of the conversation to continuing issues in this quest for AI, but that the JAIC is continuing to lead on. And one of that is, the ongoing work on AI ethics and making sure that this is implemented in a principled and ethical way. And then, really leading the department on work on test evaluation, verification, and validation, particularly for machine learning systems that are leveraging this new capability. So we'd love to hear, as you're coming into the JAIC and really being focused in on implementation, just to hear your quick thoughts on the continued work on ethics and TEV&B.
Okay, great. Hey, thanks, Lindsay. I was hoping you would ask me about ethics, right? Because I have had my own epiphany. Like I came into this job, I'll confess, thinking AI ethics. Yeah, that sounds important, right? And we should do ethical things. Whether we're talking about AI or not AI, we should do ethical things. I mean, that's who we are, right? But the more I think about this, like I've just really had this epiphany about okay, the role of ethics in AI development and the force, right? And ethics is absolutely foundational to everything that we do. So what do I mean by that? Let me give you a parallel example here. The law of war, right? Warfighters understand the law of war, right? So there's jus ad bello, law going to war, and jus ad bellum, which is law, in warfare, right? And so that's an ethic, right? It's a set of ethics. Like, we will do these things, we won't do those kind of things. And AI ethics kind of carries the same weight. Think about the law of war. It defines target discrimination. It defines collateral risk calculations. It defines, protecting innocent lives. It reduces unintended consequences. It has a direct impact on how we make battlefield decisions, right? Like I've been a targeteer. Many people who are listening have been a targeteer. You really work hard to make sure that your targets and your targeting follows the law of war and reduces damage. And so AI ethics kind of carry the same weight. They have the same kind of heft. the AI ethics, the ethical principles: responsible, equitable, traceable, reliable, governable, right? I think everybody's familiar with that. For AI, I think one of the most important thing, I mean, this is the holy grail here, is trust, right? So for all the cool stuff that we talk about, if commanders don't trust their AI, then we won't use it, right? And so you have to, AI trust comes from explainability, and with explainability comes, the equitability, the traceability, the reliability, right, of the systems that you're talking about. Your ethic carries through into, okay, am I going to trust the system because it carries these ethical threads through its construction? It drives employment of AIs in ways that are responsible, governable, right? So, are we using our AI tools within the parameters for which they've been trained and tested? Are they governable? Can we control unintended escalation? Is there an off switch, right? Does the commander have the ability, or does a machine have the ability to maybe tell the operator, hey, you know what? I'm not really sure about this particular decision, so I'm just going to flag that for you, that it looks like a cat to me, but I'm not really sure in this case, right? Like that's the kind of ethic that we need to build into our platforms. It has the same impact as the law of war on the processes and controls. And so you can easily see then, like, the intrinsic relationship with test and evaluation, because the path to explainability, the path to trust really starts with a test and evaluation, right? So we hold those two things as like really important pillars, cross-cutting across all AI applications, but really important for, foundational really to making AI something useful for the force. I would just make one more point. We also have to think about trusted ecosystems in this place, right? Because as we talk a lot about things like Intel and Fire's integration, right, where you're able to take Intel data and generate firing solutions and act on that data. Well, you have to be pretty darn sure that the provenance of that data, right? How good is that data? And so, is that fireable data or is that not fireable data? So these are ethical decisions and ethical principles that we have to bake into everything that we do, especially as we start to integrate across systems, right? And so this will be this is hard work. This is the kind of stuff that the JAIC, is in kind of the catbird seat to help manage the force through this challenge, because it's so important, because it's foundational to everything that we do in AI.
Yes, sir. We have a fantastic list of questions here, but just want to ask you one last one, because I think this discussion on AI ethics and governance and explainability is a really great one. A phrase that's come up a couple of times today and is sort of out there in the lexicon is this AI readiness for the force. What does it look like? Yeah. Being AI ready, what does that mean to you? How do you think about it? Sort of from rifleman to a 3-star. What does readiness mean, and what's the JAIC's role in helping get there?
Yeah, so that's really important for scaling AI, right? And this is I smile because this is exactly the challenge we're wrestling with now. As we start to we recognize, to be transformational, to help the department transform, we really have to look at where people are having problems. So we're like, what's preventing the integration of AI into decision processes? So when you do that, kind of the first thing you have to do, you have to build a relationship with a customer, right? So, we're building relationships with combatant commands, with defense agencies, with services. And so as you assess the maturity of that relationship, and you assess the maturity of, a new AI consumer, you have to help them see, first of all, they have to see themselves in an AI environment, right? They have to see AI as a solution to their problems. If they have lots of data, if they're making big, expensive decisions or warfighting decisions, we have to help them see, like, hey, let's help you connect the dots. You don't have to do seat of the pants decision making on $1 billion enterprise. You can actually use data to drive that very effectively. So to do that, kind of the first thing you have to do once you kind of get the nod that, yeah, we think that we're a use case for AI, then you have to do an AI readiness assessment, right? And you're not, if you're not AI ready, then it's just dumb to talk about artificial intelligence integration, because you actually need to have a platform. You need to have the basis for instantiating an AI. So you have to understand your decision environment. You have to ensure that you understand your data environment. Where is it? What's valuable? What's not valuable? How do you get it? Where is that data source? Is that a data stream that you can leverage? What's the quality? How is it formatted? Is it collected? Is it stored? All that kind of stuff before you even start talking about instantiating an AI. So, there's the kind of the primary, the provision of data set of calculations, but probably, this is a point I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but one of the most important things in this space doing an AI readiness evaluation is functional expertise, right? So we have lots of really great technical people in the JAIC. But you know what we also need in the JAIC, and we need across the force, are really good functional experts, right? Somebody who can map out the logistics enterprise, somebody who can map out the fires enterprise and the fires process and how you do decision making at every point in that process. So AI readiness doesn't come until you've thought through, your domain experts, whether that's a supply domain, at DLA, or a fires domain, in a rocket battalion, in the Army somewhere, or, on a ship. Like, if you have that domain expertise, and now you can start evaluating the sources of your data and you're really mapping your own decision making, you become AI ready, right? Now you're ready to have a conversation about, okay, now how can the machine help you with this, right? And so, and the distinction, then you cross a bridge to now seeking AI enablement, right? So you've made yourself AI ready by having the conditions. Now let's talk about how we best enable you, right? And so then there's a whole nother set of requirements. We hope to be able to help people kind of evaluate themselves and their own workflows, and that's what we're trying to do. We're realigning our missions force here to as they build their relationships, to help people see solutions in the data that they own.
Thank you, sir. I think we'll take the last few minutes we have together to turn to our audience questions, though we certainly have hit on some of the themes that our audience is thinking of. But I'd like to read you our first one from Major General Seeley, who's at the U.S. Marines Joint Forces Staff College. So we'll pitch you one from your brother.
Yeah.
In your assessment,
hello, Bill.
How far-reaching will AI impact our battle informations as they are organized across the joint force? For example, are we going to have more maintainers for AI-related equipment, more or less software programmers? Are unit missions going to go away and evolve, or are new ones going to be created?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Bill, for a hard question. I appreciate that. But I think the quick answer is, we don't know yet, right? Because just like, I just described an AI readiness for a tactical use case, a small tactical or functional use case. What does that do when you apply it across the force, right? Like, holy cow. I think we can learn from, like the standard sort of AI model, which is, the first thing you do in an enterprise is you apply AI to your existing workflows, right? You're not scaring the herd. You're not spooking the herd. You're applying AI to an existing workflow. And now, people are comfortable with that. Oh, okay. You mean I don't have to read that spreadsheet? I can just get the deltas identified to me, right? Then I don't have to do that work. And they're comfortable with that. But that will only get you so far, because what we will need to do from a warfighting perspective is think through, okay, what are our warfighting processes, right? So now we've defined what our decisions are, and the functional experts have walked us through, okay, look, this is how this is how data drives my function, whatever that is. The second phase of this will be, I have all this data. I should really be doing this a different way, right? And so you go from AI augmenting an existing process to professionals in whatever function redefining their function to take advantage of data so they can create tempo and they can make things easier and better. So that's probably, for warfighting functions, kind of like how we'll probably see it evolve, like in that way. How that ends up, like what processes and functions, I think we will see things, that are special, unique snowflake, functions may go away, may be incorporated into other functions. Maybe you can just do that entire thing with data. I do think what we will, one of the things that we'll really have to pay attention to is making sure that this is not just, joint commanders per se. This is riflemen, this is bosun mates, this is air crewmen who actually benefit from this proliferation of AI.
We'll go to our next question here. Let's see. Yeah, Mila Jasper from NextGov asks, what is the JAIC doing to implement DoD's new enterprise-wide data strategy? And data you mentioned a few times today. Yeah. What are some key projects the JAIC will undertake to help implement the new data strategy?
Yeah, so we're connected across all of the data modernization elements, and so with data, I mean the things that we have to think through with data, as data becomes more important to us now, especially in an AI environment, we have to think through the provenance of our data, the trustworthiness of our data. And so, that's kind of like on the input end. And so we actually have to have ways to do that. Just like everything else I'm talking about, the idea is easy to say, implementation can be really difficult. And so with data now, how do we actually operate with that data, right? How do we get it into algorithms? And then how do we protect it, right? This is one of probably the most important element of data in a data strategy is how do we protect our data, right? Not only just what classification is it, but where do we keep it? Who do we release it to? How do we protect it from adversarial AI? We didn't really talk about adversarial AI today, but that's a booming. It's still primarily a research and development kind of set of questions, but there are really some real concerning issues about AI vulnerability for with contaminated data, with you name it. So if you have an algorithm and you have the set of data that you use to train it, then that creates vulnerabilities that you may be able to find a way to exploit an algorithm. So that's a real important line of effort that we're just getting started. The data strategy helps us codify, like, okay, where are those key places in a data flow that we have to really pay attention to, and how do we ensure security and trust throughout the process?
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Brian and I are immensely grateful for your time here with us today. I have one last question that I think fits so nicely because it takes us all the way back to the beginning, back to 1914. So Sydney Friedberg from Breaking Defense would like to know, so what is your information age equivalent of riding your horse into machine gun fire in 1914? What's that nightmare scenario for you?
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Sydney. That's a great question. I hadn't thought through like that, but as Lindsay, as you were reading the question, here's a symptom, right? You're in your command post somewhere, and you are either looking at a PowerPoint up on the screen, and you're briefing the commander, who's got decisions to make. You're going to brief him on PowerPoint, and you're going to have a stoplight chart or whatever, that you built yesterday that doesn't reflect kind of what the enemy's doing today, or what what's your readiness level? Have you, your logistics? When we, in the industrial age, we put PowerPoint slides up that sort of like showed our assessment of what the world was. In an information age, when we start to have the right integrated systems, the right data feeds, we go from just an assessed environment to more of a measured environment, right? So I think about, as an intel officer, if I'm given an intel brief, or I was given an intel brief 20 years ago, it would be, me and Sergeant Jones, and we'd try to figure out, we think the enemy's moving like this, and that's our best guess with what we know. We were willing to make decisions on that kind of like, okay, well, this is the best we have. And I think in the future, as we get more data informed, we'll be able to make much better decisions, right? Because we're much more data driven. So the evidence, I think, Sydney, to get right to your question, I mean, the evidence is going to be when we're driven by data flows more than just PowerPoint slides that somebody guessed, right? It's kind of like the self-driving car, right? At what point do you have enough miles on that car that you actually trust it? And I think we'll get to that point across the, across the force over time, where no kidding, we start to trust our AIs, and we start, just like every other new piece of technology, and we start to leverage them, to much greater effect. That's the symptom.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again. I know Brian and I are immensely grateful, as is our audience, for you taking the time to join us today for this long discussion on all things AI. I think, as you pointed out, we only missed adversarial AI, but if that's the only topic we didn't touch on, then I think we're doing pretty good. We'll just have to have you back on later to chat adversarial AI.
Yeah, we'll save that for next time. And thank you, Lindsay, to you and Brian both. I really appreciate the opportunity, and thanks to everybody. And I guess to everybody that's out there, remember the Lancers, right? We need to drop our lances and get into the data environment. So thank you all very much for your efforts.
Great, thank you, sir.